Hey, everybody, Happy New Year. It is 2021. Thank goodness. And it's the first week of the season. I've had a lovely vacation. I'm sorry I've missed you. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful holiday. For those of you that participated in Silver Bells for Seniors, thank you so much for putting the bells up in your windows. I know that so many of our community members were grateful to see those bells, knowing that you cared about them. So thanks again for putting them up. And I hope that your holiday was absolutely delightful. We are still recording via Zoom, so please enjoy our first New Year's guest. Mr. Chris Wilkinson is with us today, and we've got a few things to share with you about taking care of ourselves. Hey, Chris, how are you? Welcome to the program. Happy 2021.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me. Great to reconnect, and Happy New Year to all your listeners.
Well, thank you. It's been a while since you and I have connected. And one thing that I know about you is that you are such an active member of our community, doing extraordinary things. And one of the things I know that you're becoming quite well known for is the transformation of people through better health choices. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you for asking. I think it goes back to my roots, Kathy. I took a kinesiology degree at UVic back when Jesus was a youngster. And since that time, different iterations of career. And you and I have both been involved in senior care, and I'm still involved in senior care, but my roots were in health promotion. And I think the reason why I was drawn to that initially was just having an active background, wanting to know more about health, but really it's about supporting people and helping people. And I know you get that, and your listeners are tuning into you likely because they share some of that same trait, right? So owning and operating a home care company for the last 13 years has been a blessing and a great learning curve. But it also, at some point, I missed that one-to-one connection with people. And when you run a company and it starts to grow and you become more the office person, you miss that, right? Like people that like being around people and being energized by people, you miss that. And so for me, it was being pulled back into that area of helping people, and health is something that's important to me. And I've got 2 teenage boys and really want to support them as to how much they'll listen to me. So that's kind of what.
Well, they listen by example. That's the reality, right? We teach our kids by our actions, for sure. But I also, you brought up the senior care part of it. And I would imagine that in working directly with them, and your company, for those of our community that may not know, is Nurse Next Door, fabulous, well-known organization, incredible work for seniors and community. But I'll imagine that, your service providers, they come back with stories of people that are failing in their health. It must be something, with your degree that says, this is preventative. How can we take care of ourselves differently so that we don't find ourselves in more challenging situations as we age? Is that something that resonates with you?
You're so right. It definitely gave me a different perspective. We tend to, I think I'm like a lot of people, I learn by doing. I don't learn always by just reading and seeing what other people are doing. We can take stuff from that, but it's really through doing it myself that I tend to learn and internalize things. And over the last 13 years, working with families and seniors, and often right up through the palliative phase and through end of life, you see a lot of different scenarios. You see a lot of people's health. You see a lot of people's nutrition by opening their fridge.
Yeah.
And, as much as I'd love to be in every client's home and standing on the soapbox and telling them all about how important it is to make sure they get enough protein and essential oils and vitamins, people just don't really want to hear that on a day-to-day basis very often when they're inviting us into their home about providing some support to help keep them at home and seniors care. So the two have remained fairly mutually exclusive, interestingly. And so I just roll with it. I think, in Nurse Next Door home care, we tend to speak with a lot of adult daughters that are in their 50s and early 60s. When I'm reaching out to people or offering to talk to people about their nutritional health, it's often people in our cohort 30s and 40s and 50s that are most interested.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
different group of people to some degree, and I love it. Like, I love being able to help people. So
Well, and I know that your heart is always in the right place. One of the things, I met you, I think 6 or 7 years ago now, in my office when I was a Better at Home coordinator for a Nanaimo Family Life Association. I've long passed that. I'm now at the United Way, but for those of listeners who are freshly tuning in. But what I have found over the years is that your consistent kindness and wanting to really be there to support the people you're working with has been so refreshing, right? I've always admired your tact and skill in talking to people and helping them just to really understand that they are cared about and that there's ways that they can take care of themselves. I guess my next question to you is, as you move towards this nutritional phase, do you see any trends in 2021 that are really sort of standing up, particularly as we are much more paying attention to what's happening in our own home? I think people are eating differently now because we're not going out to restaurants. What kinds of things are you seeing in your practice?
the term COVID-19 comes to mind, and I'll say tongue in cheek that it's the 19 pounds that the average person has put on during COVID. That's the COVID-19 that, tongue in cheek, no disrespect to the pandemic and people that are struggling through it, because there are a number of
Yeah,
people struggling. But
indeed.
like you alluded to, there's just more time around the kitchen, more working from home,
Yeah,
more soothing those feelings of loneliness and isolation. And of course, food gets that dopamine release going, and that is addictive, right? Like,
yeah,
dopamine is the addiction neurotransmitter. So yeah, a lot more food is going in, and I'm finding that there's two different insights that I've gathered so far. Is one is that obvious thing we just talked about, that people have more access to food when they're not working in an office, when they're working from home. And then the second thing is that, given the pandemic and isolation and loneliness, is that I feel like there's a bit of a tendency for people to not talk about it much at the
I
same
agree.
time.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
it's a bit more hidden. I'm having less conversations with people this January than I was having last January. And we know in the fitness industry that January is the big month, right?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah. January is the month where everybody is renewing their lapsed or long non-used fitness memberships with, various different organizations and community. Most of them are closed, I think, still. As we are recording today, I think they are still closed. I have one of those memberships. I'll be honest with you. I'm not really sure if they're still taking money out of my account.
yeah,
Uh, and Christmas didn't help, right? Of course, I think that this year, in my opinion anyway, this year, because we were home more in COVID, there was a lot more gardening. There was a lot more canning. I know I took up canning for the very first time. I don't make jam. I don't eat a lot of sweets, to be honest with you. I'm more of a savory person. I'm not a sweets gal. But I love the starches and the potatoes and the comfort foods and like all of that. And it's a lot easier when they're grown out of your own backyard. So, I found that this August and September, you couldn't find any canning equipment anywhere. So by the time Christmas has come, I suspect that people have given a lot of their homemade cookies, their homemade treats. I've received far more homemade treats this year than I ever have.
do you find that people are becoming more self-sufficient in general? And I don't just mean from canning and growing, although that's one of the main things, that people are growing their own vegetables. And the 100-mile diet has become a lot more popular in the last 10 years. But I also mean maybe financially as well, where people are starting to think about, does the government really always have my best interests at heart? Do I want to continue having a centralized banking system always look after me? Or I'm getting a bit off topic, but I think people are becoming a bit more self-sufficient, and that's kind of a movement, would you say?
Oh, I would agree with you completely. And I
Mhm.
also think that there are people, and then Chris, I would imagine that you have seen this too, is that people that traditionally do a lot of working out are still working out. They're just doing it differently, right? I know my best friend lives in Vancouver, and she is an avid exerciser. She's 72. You would swear the woman was like 21. She is completely fit. She's not let COVID, although she has been very frustrated and frightened by COVID for sure. She lives right in an area where COVID is just all around her. And so, but she has created new memberships through Zoom and otherwise where she, does Zumba every day, then she does pilates 3 times a week, and she does, she stays fit. And many of the people that I know that are traditionally or exercise savvy, they've just found another way to do it at home. Are you doing it at home, Chris? Are you? Because you're an
I was.
exercise guy too.
Yeah, I was. I definitely, I am a fitness facility guy. Like that's my mental health break midday through my
Yeah.
work day is I'll go around 1 o'clock and do my workout and then get back to work. So for me, it scratches a few itches. It's obviously my physical health, but it's also a big part of my mental health. It's a big part of my mental reset halfway through the day. You're right. Fitness facilities were closed for a while. Now a lot of them are open. The government has said like spin classes and things that are high intensity interval, lots of sweat, lots of breathing. Those kinds of classes are on hold, but many of the fitness facilities have reopened with new rules in place. And I think what you and I have been talking around too is this idea that mental health, like exercise for mental health too,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
it's so important when loneliness and isolation are increasingly identified as a major killer in our society. And yes, for that third age phase of people, especially seniors, it's talked about a lot within senior circles, but below the surface when you come to mainstream sort of news and discussion. And so I really big believer in people still having those social connections when you think about exercising, whether it's in a gym like I do, or whether it's outside, which, we also do too, but some people just want to be outside for their exercise. And I love that too. There's those other components of health, like the social health
Yeah.
and the mental health that are equally as important, if not more.
I wonder your thoughts on how mental health, the trend for mental health is leaning with so much of the lack in ability to get out and do the things we want to do. And on top of that, we have illness and then we have winter, right? I think at the time of taping this on Zoom, we're expecting sunshine for, I think, and it's not fully here yet, but it'll be like sunshine for the first time in weeks. It was throughout the Christmas break. I don't recall there being many more than an hour here or an hour there. So our vitamin D is down. People are much more prone to that cabin fever feeling on top of that, right? What's your take?
I'm sure you're noticing it as much as I am, that friends you're talking to are acknowledging the weather more than we ever have before. We take this extraordinary year of 2020, which, yes, had some gifts. It's not been a year we ever want to revisit as a society again, but it's had some gifts that we can take from it if we choose to.
I agree.
But you're right. There's been these concentric circles that have been overlapping. You had a pandemic, you had a season around Christmas time where the weather has been more rainy on the West Coast and more dark and dank than we've maybe noticed in previous years. And it absolutely is impacting our mental health without a doubt. We all know that. We don't need a research study to tell us that it's been one of the toughest years for all of us individually and as a group, and as far back as we can remember. So I think what stuck out for me, Kathy, too, was in the summertime when people were able to get out and about again, and how uplifting that was, how refreshing it was, and what a reset button it felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really challenging to go back in. I know Dr. Bonnie Henry is doing it for our own good. Instead of our safe 6, our safe 1, our family coming only during the holiday. We've noticed the numbers have started to rise now that the holiday itself is finished and New Year's is done. We're going to start seeing those numbers rise again. I think that part of the concern that I have for people when they haven't got the ability to look after themselves is the suicide rate. And I know that for men, we're neither you or I don't think are experts in this part of it. So this is more of an observation part of the conversation. But I know that for many men, March has been known as the highest rate of suicide for men every year. And as we come towards that, I'm curious, especially in older men, men over the age of 65, 70, 75, there's a lot of change during the next few months for people. And so I guess, I wonder, you're a guy, how have you seen or have you had any experience with, dealing with such a difficult time for older men?
Great question. And no, I don't get a lot of experience with our male clients with that. And certainly I wouldn't call myself any sort of expert in that area. But what I am an expert on is what I experience, like my experience, what I've been through and what I do. And I know you'd agree with this, is that the first step is the awareness and finding that person who one can 100% trust and talk to.
Yeah,
And Brene Brown, I'm sure you read and listen
very
to some
much.
Brene,
Love
love
Renee.
Brene Brown. And she talks about the marble jar, right? She talks about a wonderful story about her daughter coming home from school one day, having had a tough day with a friend and feeling like she was betrayed. And her and mom Brene talk about the marble jar. And you want to talk to people who put marbles in the jar, not take marbles out of the jar. And then
Yeah.
once you have a full jar with somebody, they're your go-to person, right? And so I would just encourage any listeners, if they're listening, that have any concerns around that area, any feelings that they're wrestling with, emotions that they're struggling with, is that who's that one person?
Yeah.
Who's that one person that they know they can trust without a doubt, that they can have that conversation with and share? Because you and I both know that once we release that energy and get it out to the right person, we feel so much better. We feel like we've
Yes.
just been honest with ourselves, not so much just the other person, but with ourselves, and our spirit knows that. And what I'd say to the person who's listening that says, well, I don't really have that person yet. It's a yet. That person's out there and they'll meet them. But journaling is that other thing that I would say is something that we can do on our own, that is so cleansing, to just sit down with a blank page and write how we're feeling and get it out. Like, get it on paper, get it out. Talk to that person if they have that person. And then what's your experience with the crisis line, the Mid-Island crisis line?
Oh, in my case, I think the Mid-Island Crisis Line is marvelous, and certainly working with uh, any of the local counselors through Nanaimo Family Life or through other associations you need to have a place to vent and to go to, and to do it in a way where you feel safe. Journaling, I really believe in. I think that people, if you get a chance to write it down, you can diffuse some of your emotions so readily by doing that. And I love what you said about Brene Brown and the marble jar. It's true. We all have our person. Sometimes people don't want to share their burden with that person because they feel that it's a burden. Being a friend is never a burden. Having an opportunity to share is never a burden. In fact, it's a gift. Allowing yourself to be that vulnerable, to be open to people. As you know, my belief is regarding the stone soup mentality, that everybody brings something to the table. The reality is that everyone in your life has the ability to bring a carrot, or a spice, a little piece of potato, whatever it is, to make that soup so that your life is much more enriched. And you're right, when you think about how your body feels, body has memory, right? As a kinesiologist, the body has a memory. It remembers the trauma, it remembers pain. And therefore, finding ways to ask your body, what's really going on right now? How can I nourish you? Whether it's through food, through company, through kindness, through writing, what is it that nourishes you? And then you can take it to the next level and start to remember that this beautiful vessel that we have that is looking after us needs that support, wouldn't you say?
That's a great point. And I was thinking about it earlier just in preparation. I know I loved how you approach this, is that, Chris, we're not going to talk about it beforehand. We're just going to have a conversation and see where it goes. And so I was thinking, like, when you think about health, that's a big, big topic. It's like, you can't
Huge.
just, you can't just ask somebody, tell me about health, right? Like you can't. And there's so many components to it. And when you think about sort of nourishing ourselves, and if you were to ask me the question, what's most important, exercise, nutrition, or mental health, or one of the others, I would say, yeah, it's exercise, and it's also nutrition, and it's mental health, and it's the social health, like it's all emotional, like it's all of those components are equally important, and we really do need to absorb something in all of those areas at different points in time. But what I would say is that, if I was sitting down with one of your listeners, and one of your listeners was just asking me for coffee and say, hey, I liked what you had to say, I'm curious, tell me more, I'd say, well, tell me more. Like, tell me more about where you're at, because that person's thing might be exercise, might be there, and I use this term tongue-in-cheek jokingly, but the gateway drug, like it's
Totally.
what's going to open them up to that next thing. So like earlier in my life, it was exercise, and I then became a personal trainer and worked with people because I wanted them to share that feeling that I got from learning about how good exercise can feel. And exercise can be what you said, can be gardening, right? Exercise can be whatever activity gets our heart rate up, whatever it is. And so, it could be exercise, could be nutrition. If somebody's more interested in exploring how they feel with exploring the nutrition, well, then I'm in. Let's talk about it. If someone wants to talk about mindset, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I certainly am reading a lot more in the area of mindset. And let's talk about that. What does it mean to you? And so for me, I like to meet the person where they're at. And I just love it when people are open, just open.
Absolutely. Be open because you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
You know,
And there's,
I think
yeah.
that's I think what you said is so true. Mindset has a lot to do with it as well. I'd like to unpack that a bit, but before we do, I just want you to know that if you've just tuned in, you're listening to CHLY on 101.7 FM in beautiful Nanaimo. I'm Kathy Holmes. I am your host of Act 3. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our guest today, Chris Wilkinson, the fabulous Chris Wilkinson from Nurse Next Door, as well as I'm going to say as well as, because I'm not sure. I know you do a lot of nutrition stuff. Do you have a company that you associate with? What's that company?
Yeah, I do. I am associated with a nutritional company that I use their products. My sons use their products. It's Isagenix. People have heard about it. People hear different things in the community, but I just really connected with their ingredients, their philosophy of no junk, all clean, but make it taste good and make it convenient too. And I think, for me, Kathy, that's what hooked me on it, is the quality has to be there if I'm going to feed it to my kids and put it in my own body.
Yep.
But for me, I'm not that person who's going to stay home on a Sunday and make all my meals for the week. And I applaud those people that do, but we're busy. We need convenience. So I love having premium nutrition that's also convenient. So that's my sweet spot.
Well, I agree with your sweet spot. I think that there's some parts of all of us. I know people that have used Isagenix and have been incredibly happy with it. And so I applaud that you're doing something that makes you feel good and that you're willing to give to your kids, because I think that's a testament in itself. Chris, I'm just going to tell people here that they need to go get a piece of paper while you and I are chatting, because in reality, they're going to want to reach out and have a conversation with you, whether or not it's to talk about mindset or exercise or, something to do with their mom or dad that needs some support at Nurse Next Door, all of the good stuff for sure, and how people will reach you. So in a couple minutes, I'll get you to share that information. So meanwhile, to our listeners, please do make sure you go grab a piece of paper and a pen so you can grab Chris's information. Chris, I'm wanting to kind of go back to the body for a little bit, because what I know for sure in my experience is that when I sit on my ass, it hurts. In this day and age, with so much going on with Zoom, I have to tell you the best thing that I bought for myself were two things. Actually, one is new. The other one is newish. One is a stand-up desk, because I found that I was sitting and I was sitting and I was sitting all the time. And I literally meant that my ass hurt because I have a very hectic job. And it takes a lot of time standing in front of a computer screen. The other thing I just bought was a massage mat because I haven't got the flexibility that I used to have. My body has been very unhappy, as anyone who listens know that I suffer from a nasty condition called ulcerative colitis that is almost in remission, but it's not quite there yet. It's a work in progress. Keep your fingers and toes. I'll take prayers. I love prayers. But the part of it is that my body doesn't work. I know it remembers what my muscles feel like, because when I do go for a walk and do the things I love to do, when I do exercise, which I must say I do love to do, I love the endorphins that I get. But what advice would you give people who, like me, who are used to getting out there and doing a lot? What tools in the toolbox could you offer to help people not feel the pain that we feel because we haven't exercised in the same way that we maybe once did?
That's a great question. I think it's one of the most asked questions is like, how do I make it stick?
Yeah.
How do I make it consistent? And I'd say two things to that. One of them is more of a cognitive exercise, and one of them is more an administrative exercise. And the cognitive exercise is sort of digging in and sitting down, even with that little journal or piece of paper, and writing down, why is this important to me? So if I was to sit down and ask, well, why is activity important to me? Well, I know it's important for me to be healthy. Not a very sexy reason. That's not going to motivate me. So I need to go to the next level of the why, on the why ladder, and take the next rung. And so why is it important for me to be healthy? Okay, well, I know I want to live longer and avoid dementia and heart disease and cancer the best I can. And I know exercise is one way to do that. But that's not super sexy reason either, right? Like we as we get to our age and beyond, we start thinking more long term. But when I'm in my 20s and 30s, like long term was not a motivator. And
No.
it I wouldn't have exercised in my 30s because I wanted to avoid heart disease and cancer and dementia. Like, just wasn't really on top of mind. And some people can, and I love that, but I think many of us don't. So digging one level deeper, for me, I start getting into reasons about, I love how I feel.
Yeah.
I love how I feel. And I think when people connect with that reason as to their deeper why, if they can ask them why 5 levels deep on that question, why is that important to me? Okay. Why is that important to me? Okay. And why is that important to me? And if they can dig 3 to 5 levels deep, Kathy, they find that it's really a deep-seated reason as to why it's important to them. So usually it comes down to how it makes them feel that particular moment, hour, day, week. Comes down to I want to inspire my kids. It comes down to deep, important reasons like that. And when somebody understands their why, they're way more apt to do it. And so Simon Sinek, if you listen to any Simon Sinek, he's all about the why, right?
I love Simon. So, in fact, I was going to ask whether or not Simon was your bud, because Simon, he totally, that's so true. That 5 level of really getting to the root of it. And then, like anything else, once you get to the root, you have to put action to it.
And that leads into the other one, which is the administrative one, which is for those of us that have a day timer and have that scheduled thing in, it needs to be scheduled.
Yeah.
And if I don't have a day timer and don't follow a daily schedule, which I do, so I actually schedule it in on my notebook each day for an hour and a half for the going to and from, and then the 45 to 60 minutes that I'm doing it. Yeah. But if I'm, say, somebody who's retired and I don't follow a specific day timer protocol, then I need to at least write it down on a notepad saying that that's my goal for the day, and that's my intention. And then maybe if there's a third thing is to reach out to somebody and communicate it. So whether that's a workout partner that makes someone at least 50% more likely to follow through on it, sometimes even as much as 98% more likely when we make the intention, write it down, communicate it, and then have a partner, an accountability partner, we're in the 90s of percentage of that thing is going to happen. So one of the podcasts I listened to just reiterated that in January, that when we just have a goal that's in our head, it's more like a dream. We'd call it like a dream, and it's great to have those things, but until we write it down communicate it to somebody and have an accountability partner. Not until we do those 3 other things are we in the 90s of percentage of likelihood that it's going to get accomplished and we're going to have success with that outcome.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you totally. And there is something to be said for those people that don't have a calendar anymore, that are retiring or who have less work associated. I mean, I know a lot of retirees, by the way, that work more than I do. Right, it's so much more volunteering, but they do
more
have
passion work, right? More passion work, more.
Absolutely. But this day and age of technology, right? Our cell phone, let's face it, there are calendars and there are tools that you can use to remind yourself. I think that most of all, though, there has to be a desire. You have to begin with the want to make change in your life, whether it's you want to feel better about yourself or you want to just connect with your body again. The one thing that I noticed about being ill for as long as I've been, it's a year and a half now that I've struggled with this condition, is I was so disconnected. Right? You become so disconnected with your body and therefore you become disconnected in your mind. And part of that is to do with the drugs, right? Part of that is to do with the weather. Part of it's to do with whatever. Like there's any number of reasons and excuses for why things are the way they are. But you have to at some point come to a decision. You just don't want to feel like that anymore. Right? You're just done. You want to move on. 2021 gives us that option, wouldn't you say? It's a brand new year. And like you said, it was, 2020 sucked. Let's face it. Everybody knows it. It had a really, crappy connotation for a lot of people. And also, as you said so eloquently, from that dust, there's also so much positive that came out of it. We've learned a lot about ourselves, the way we can work, the way we can be with people. We just had to adjust. So this is just another adjustment, right? Our body taking care of ourselves is just another adjustment. What does it look like to you?
Rhetorical question, but if I had to ask you, Kathy, what gems have you taken from going through this health struggle? I know you'd be able to list a couple of things that have come out of it for you that have actually, you would categorize them as that's been a positive. And it sucks, like health struggles suck. Ulcerative colitis sucks. And 2020
There's always something good though that comes out of anything you experience. Always there's a gleam of sunshine.
Always. And when somebody would say to themselves, no, there's nothing good that has come out of this situation, they're not looking at it from the right perspective. And I've been there. Like I'm somebody who comes from a background of not the most positive person, not the most positive environment that I came from. And this isn't a woe is me story. This is everybody who's listening saying, yeah, I can connect with that because my life sucked for a while too, or my life sucked for a long time. But when you start to shift that mindset to glass is half full, what can I take away from this situation that's actually helping me? That's when you're on the right track. And there's days when that's really hard, right?
I want to use that glass for a second. There's not a half full concept. That's either full or it's empty. As soon as you put water in a glass, it's full, right? So the reality is that when we live in deficit, if we choose to live in deficit, then whatever it is that we look at is going to be one of lack. If we choose to look at life with a positive connotation, even in the ugliest of days, we can find, right? There's so many illustrations out there where, and I'm not trying to be Pollyanna either, right? But there's so many illustrations on the stormiest days where you see a mother dove in a tree with, covering her child. And it's absolutely beautiful. And yet all around, it just feels like there's this stormy weather, right? So I think it's a mindset. And I think that people need to make a decision daily. Do I want to, I think everybody should be allowed to live in the moment of feeling frustrated for a moment or two or 5 or 6, right? It's all fine to be
absolutely
be there, acknowledge it, own it. If you want to be in a pity party for a week, be in a pity party for a week, but recognize that you have the choice every day to make a different decision for your future.
I like to say that I've got 24 hours. Yep. I've got 24 hours to sit and stew in this and process it, be pissed off, be angry, be upset, shed a tear if I want to shed a tear, whatever, right? Like I give myself that window. I think that's part of the grace conversation, right? We need to allow ourselves grace. And the more you have these kind of deeper conversations with people, with friends, with people that are important to us, the more you realize that this is a shared experience. Everybody's going through the same, am I allowed to say the S word on your?
Oh yeah.
We're all going through the same
radio.
Yeah. Well, Chili listeners, we're all going through the same shit. Whether you're 20 something, 30 something, 50 something, 70 something, 80
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
your emotions are the same. You're going to struggle with things. You're going to have tough days. You're going to have tough months, even a tough year. And we're happy that 2020 is hindsight, right? Like
Yes.
the year 2020 is hindsight. So
I know, right?
hindsight's 2020, but yeah, like we have to acknowledge, we know that, and this is classically a male pattern. I'm not gonna get too gender specific here, but it's classically a male pattern to not talk about stuff, sweep it under the rug, put on a brave face. I'm a tough guy. I got to be tough, be tough, grow some balls. These are like things that are no longer really acceptable. The whole John Wayne cowboy image isn't really that cool anymore, and it's still cool in certain circles. And if somebody's ego needs to hold on to that, then that's what they need to do. But for the most of us that are moving forward and growing and progressing, it's not what I'm teaching my boys. And they're hockey players, they're good players, they're tough on the ice, but I still need to tell them that you need to talk about how you're feeling. You need to share your emotions. And needs the wrong word because they're going to tune me out. But I need to lead by example, as you said earlier, is that the only thing they're going to do is follow my lead. And, if I didn't have the best lead growing up, then it's on me to learn new skills, to explore, to read, to YouTube stuff, and find out where my jam is, find out where my sweet spot is. Did you find that too, that when you started that journey of awareness and awakening, that it was just something small that started, maybe a conversation or a book, and then YouTube now is this amazing resource?
Yeah. I've been on this journey a long time, right? And I started off with Shakti Gawain way back. And I read a book called Living in the Light, which for me was just such an extraordinary eye-opening experience of, noting that we are a reflection of, our experiences. And so if we've been surrounded by really difficult things, difficult traumas and very painful things, and we are not mature enough mentally by taking inventory of what's going on, we can let that kill us. We can let that part of that negativity hurt us. And Shakti Gawain basically taught that, in reality, this is energy. We're all just energy. We can have the good energy. And even through the worst of situations, the good energy can come in and it can serve us in really positive ways. So that was way back. And then I probably have read pretty darn near every self-help book that there was for many years, noting that I always wanted to be a better human. And I like to think of myself as a good human. I want to be kind to people. I want to be good to people. I don't want to underscore the hatred and the negativity that's in the world, but I can't deny that it's there, right? I don't want to fuel that fire, but I have to be really willing to look and notice that there's some crappy stuff that goes on in people's lives. And lots of crappy stuff happened in mine, right? Tons and tons. But the stuff that happened isn't my identity. And so going through life and reading a lot of this information just supported it. But I also will say that when I got divorced, and I was divorced, I moved to Nanaimo officially 10 years ago. When I moved to Nanaimo, I came from a very abusive husband, a very difficult 10-year marriage that, damn near destroyed my whole family. It was a very rough time. In the process, I lost family members who died of cancer. I lost almost my entire family to cancer. It was probably one of the darkest things that I could have experienced. And I knew that I couldn't do it on my own. And so frankly, I took the plunge and said, you know what, I need some counseling. I really need to talk it out. I need to work it out. I need to notice that, I need to stop ducking and being afraid and having to deal with some really rough stuff. And I think that I remained positive all the way through it because I have a very strong faith. And I knew that I was always being guided, right? No matter what, I was being guided into safety and that everything was going to be okay. And it absolutely has always been okay. In fact, moving to Nanaimo 10 years ago was the best damn thing I ever did. And I think that people need to be okay with asking for help. You know what I mean? Whether or not it's for diet or exercise, whether or not it's for home care, whether you need somebody to help you do the dishes, whether or not it's hard for people to ask for help, but I think it's a necessary thing to do in order to have a better quality of life.
So true. And whether it's somebody perceiving it as I'm not as independent or as strong as I thought I was, that's classically the view. And it's our ego sort of telling us that, no, you got this, you can do this on your own. And, you know, it's a tough way to be when we feel like we got to do it all by ourselves. And all of us have been there.
Oh,
All of us
yes.
have been there. And
Oh, yes.
maybe
Yep.
it's starting with an anonymous call to the crisis line where you don't have to give your name. You can just vent, like you said earlier. You can just vent. Maybe that's a place to start. And what I would say, and I imagine you agree, is how does that make you feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I really believe that people need to feel empowered by saying that it's okay to ask for help. And I think that there is still a culture, particularly for men, although I know it's changing. I've watched it change. My son is now 30. Well, he's not quite, but he will be 30 way too soon.
like,
Right?
Mom, 29,
That's right.
Mom.
That's right. Exactly. I'm a young punk. But, you know, the reality is that I am so grateful that he's grown up as now a father, and to watch the attentiveness and the joy that comes from him with his two children, knowing that they are going to be growing up in a society where it's now acceptable to ask for help. I mean, I get it, John Wayne stuff. There was a time stoic, like I'm tough guy, you know, but in reality, the tougher man is the one who says, I need help.
I agree that that's a sign of strength. I agree that that's not only the way that society is trending right now, but it's almost like there's this differentiation or bifurcation of, you know, we hear in many circles, the rich get richer and the poor are getting poorer. And, you know, our opinions of whether that's right or wrong doesn't matter right now. It's what group are you going to be in? Are you going to be in the emotionally poorer group and suffer? Or are you going to start to identify, coming back to something you said, is like, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
Who do I look up to? Who's my mentor? Who's somebody that I look up to? Who do I want to be? And when somebody can reflect on that and then take one little step in that direction and then acknowledge how that makes them feel to take that step, I think that's the start of awareness right there.
So who are your mentors?
Oh my goodness.
I know it's hard, hey?
A few people come to mind. When I first moved to the Cowichan Valley for a job in a physiotherapy clinic, there's a wonderful physiotherapist named Wendy Bowen, who was that person for me that I looked up to, that I was like one of those first people that I thought, wow, like I want to be more like her. She's amazing. She's brilliant. She's aware. I didn't even know what awareness was then, but you know, that understanding of, whatever she's got, like she's winning at life.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the first ones. There's another fella I worked with named Val, who is just an amazing communicator and somebody I perceive that's very emotionally intelligent. And that term emotional intelligence just blew my mind the first time I even heard it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to learn more about that.
Yeah.
I've got a friend named Sean in Nanaimo who, you know, not only a colleague, but somebody I look up to in a business sense and an attitude, and just a brilliant guy with the same philosophy as us, that, you know, we're here to serve people. We're here to enjoy this journey. I don't know what's next when I die. I don't really know. I won't know till I get there, but I think there's something. I think there's something there. And so, you know, those kinds of people are who I look up to a lot. And I think I also look up to people like you that are sharing, share what you've learned. And if there's 100,000 different people listening to this, each person will take something different, but everybody's going to take something. Everybody's going to take something from it. And you're giving that opportunity, that platform, to people take something away.
Oh, well, thanks. And I do appreciate that. I always, I have a very humbled belief that everybody has a gift and everybody has a story. And it's really important that we share them. I find that, you know, your story to me has been always inspiring. I will never forget you sitting in my office when I was at NFLA and I was the new kid on the block. and I had a vision for what I wanted Better at Home to be in Nanaimo. And you and I sat together with your colleague, and I just said, you know, this is the philosophy, this is where I'm going. How can we work together? And you and your team just went, we got your back, and right on. And I was so moved. I remember being almost in tears actually at that meeting, thinking, I found my people.
It's so true. And I remember that meeting because I remember meeting you for the first time, and I'm like, you just had this great energy about you. This huge heart is what it was. I recognize it now as just wholeheartedness and that willingness or that desire to serve people. I couldn't have put my thumb on it at the time. I think now having a better vocabulary, just sort of reading and listening more stuff around that, Brene Brown being one of the
I
main people,
love
right?
Renee.
And
Yeah.
you're like one of those people, and your energy was just so intoxicating, and just, I want to be around these kind of people more often. And one just really quickly side story as to, you brought the Better at Home program to the Central Island, and it's now become a staple, and it's absolutely foundational and so important. You brought that. And I think, how we were able to support you even along the way was when, it was growing exponentially, and you're like, Chris, like, we need more people. And at the time we had a couple of caregivers that like had just lost a bunch of hours, and we were able to hey.
Yeah, no, and your staff were amazing. I loved sharing your staff with you. I had some really good people that stayed with me for a very, very long time. I know they stayed with us both, right? And because they were completely committed to us both, right? And I really genuinely believe that it's because we have the same philosophy of serving. The idea is to serve, and that's what we're here for. We're here to gift our time in ways that, for some older adults, the Better at Home program was a godsend because they were financially in a position where they couldn't necessarily afford to have the kinds of services that private companies offered. But being able to share those resources and support community is what it's all about. And, Better at Home still is a foundational program. I've long left. We've had some great team members that have come in that are working towards it. And now I get the privilege of building Better at Home throughout the province of British Columbia. And so what a wonderful foundational place for me to be, that I can spread this joy and this really amazing program to more communities. And so it's a thrilling opportunity. So thanks for that, Chris. I really appreciate it.
It's been a huge success story, right?
Yeah, it really, really has. And I'm really grateful to you and for just showing up. Whenever I did a fundraiser or whenever anything was happening, you were always there, if not physically, in spirit, by sending a team member, sending, gifts, the things that we could auction off, stuff like that. Boy, did that make a difference. And so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Extraordinary. Chris,
don't get me welled up here.
I know. I know, we're both, this is that hug moment where, I wish we were physically together without COVID, that we could all go back to our normal selves. Chris, now's the time of the show. We're almost done. I can't believe that almost an hour has already passed us. It blows my mind, but that's near where we are. So the first things first, a little bit ago, we did ask people to run out and grab themselves a pen and a piece of paper so they could get your contact information. Now is the time. They've got it handy. Go ahead and share your contact info with our audience.
Well, if it's okay with you, I'll give a couple channels for people.
Please do.
I'll give my email first if somebody's more comfortable reaching out by email with a question or two on any health related topic or anything, home care, whatever they want to ask, just being a resource for people and share. There's no point in taking any of the knowledge that I've amassed and taking it to my grave. So if anybody has any questions, share. They can email me, Chris of Cowichan, ChrisofCowichan, chrisofcowichan@gmail.com. And if they'd rather just send a quick text or they want to call me, they can reach me on my phone or leave a message there if I can't answer. 250-668-7081, 668-7081. And I would welcome messages from people. I'll get back to them as soon as I can.
And you're on Facebook too, right? Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff. Can people reach you there?
I'm a Facebook guy, and they can Facebook Chris Wilkinson. They'll see my mug on there, and they can certainly reach out to me there as well. Messenger me.
And a fabulous mug it is. Thank you so much, Chris. As we come to a close of the program, and again, thank you for being my first guest in 2021. As every one of our listeners know, my favorite part of this show is that last little imbibe, that last little life lesson. If you could share something from your life, your experiences, whether it's related to what we've talked about or otherwise, what would be your gift to community?
Wow. Well, when we thought that we'd be talking about health, I wasn't sure how much would be about exercise, nutrition, social health, emotional health, awareness, and mindset. And I think for me, Kathy, I can only share what's been so impactful for me, coming from a pure place of authenticity, is that I noticed great things started happening in my life when I started to shift my mindset. And my background is exercise. I went to school to teach people how to do exercise better. And activity is so important. And I think, it's easy to check that one off by just going for a walk after dinner for 20 minutes. Like, it is that literally that easy to check that checkbox and feel internally satisfied that I'm doing something for my health by going for a walk. But I will say that when I started to look at nutrition and sort of be aware of what foods made me feel better, what foods made me feel worse in general, that I started to notice that was a game changer as well. But I'm still going to say that when I started to focus on gratitude and when I had a practice of gratitude, so I always called myself a grateful person, but I didn't practice it. So I kind of got to call BS on myself and say, even though I felt like I was a grateful person, I was leaving a lot on the table in terms of I'm a much happier, more content person now that I practice gratitude twice or more a day intentionally. It made an instant shift. Within 2 or 3 days, I felt my attitude, my mindset, my happiness overall palpably shift when I started practicing gratitude. So we hear about this term, attitude of gratitude. It's a wonderful saying, and I love it, and I've used it a lot, but it's actually not a practice of gratitude until it's in the schedule, until someone gets in the habit of practicing it twice a day, like almost every day. There's days that I miss, sure, but it's on my schedule. I actually have like things written down that I practice saying to make myself feel better. And I think once somebody looks at that and actually practices that, everything else follows suit. And once you've got that foundational mindset piece just started, everything else leaps off of that, comes off of that, and improves off of that.
You're absolutely right. Gratitude is everything, and I'm sure grateful for you. Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Absolutely fabulous. And absolutely, you and I are on the same page there, without a doubt. In fact, I have to just quickly share this like super, super fast. My favorite attitude of gratitude came from my son. Because we started this when he was a little child. And every night before he went to bed, of course, I would read him a story, and then he had to tell me what he was grateful for. And my favorite thing that he ever said, ever, was we had been at a gumball machine and he'd stuck a quarter in. Instead of getting 1 ball, he got 2. So his gratitude was 2 gumballs for 25 cents. He couldn't quite say the words yet, but it was 2 gumballs for 25 cents. And I will never forget that. Attitude of gratitude goes a long way. And it's certainly inspiring. Chris Wilkinson has been our guest on CHLY 101.7. You've been listening to Act 3. Can't wait to talk to you again next week. We'll see you at 1 o'clock. Don't forget to tune into Shaw, the show on Shaw. And Act 3 is still on its way. We've got a couple technical issues, but we're on the way. It's coming soon. So make sure you stay tuned. And thanks again for joining us today. Thanks, Chris. Have yourself a magnificent day.